the last resident. This story happened in spring of 2018. My friend and I were 21 years old. Let's start at the beginning for context. I met my friend G when we were in high school. He shared my love for outdoor adventure. There is a walking trail in our Midwestern US town that was once a railroad. The tracks have been taken up and replaced with a highly compacted fine gravel. This trail carves its way through heavily forested hills and valleys for well over 10 miles. G and I like to walk this trail at night. Firstly, because we had no other time to do so. Secondly, because it was simply too thrilling. Miles away from town, in a dark forest full of God knows what, we have heard our fair share of freaky noises that makes the hair on the back of your neck stand. In the darkest, most dense part of the forest, the trail is surrounded by huge trees that are close together and block even the light of a full moon to the point you can barely see the white gravel. We had a no flashlight rule that we stuck to because, believe it or not, you can see much farther without one, even when it's cloudy. Shining a light, your view is obstructed by all the branches and undergrowth that is otherwise muted. Of course, we carried flashlights in case of an emergency. By no flashlights, I mean we didn't walk with them turned on, and instead relied on our eyes adjusting to the dark to see. Anyways, I digress. The darkest part of the forest also happens to be where the ghost town is. Around the year 1923, per the fireplace in one of the houses, 5 river cabins were constructed along the railroad in close proximity. They were primarily used for bootlegging during Prohibition. These cabins were inhabited all the way up until the 1970s. They have long since been left abandoned. G and I took an interest in them and decided that we would get together during the daytime, the next time we had the chance, and go photograph and find out all the information we could about these cabins so we could research them. The first house basically is non-existent. There is no floor and no roof. Only asbestos walls on stilts and a porch. The second house is basically caved in. The ceiling sags to about 4 feet, 1.2 m off the floor. The third house is in fairly decent shape and still houses its furnishings, shag carpet, yes really, and a solid wood television with the channel buttons on the front. The fourth house is the most cabin-looking one out of them all. 2 rooms and a front porch. The fifth house is by far the best preserved. Newspapers from 1979, paint on the walls, calendars, magazines, furniture, glassware still in the cabinets, you name it. This is all information gathered previous to the day the story takes place. Well, this particular day, G and I had documented everything we could about houses 1, 3, and made our way across the ravine that separated 3 and 4. House 4 has a front porch that fell down. So to get to the front door, you have to climb up a steep porch that is basically vertical. I made my way up this porch and had to grab the lip of the board that would have originally been against the house. I pulled myself up and straddled the board. I looked around the dark house and pushed the screen door open with a metallic creak. A deep silence filled the world. I peered into the darkness there without making a sound. Then it came, a startlingly loud hiss. The hiss froze me in place. What was that? I thought. I turned to look down at G and smiled. Are you fucking with me? I asked. G's eyes were wide and an expression of terror was on his face. That wasn't me, he whispered. Knock it off, come on, I said, and it came again. Hi. It was louder this time. I turned to look back into the house. I pulled the flashlight from my pocket and shone it into the darkness. A beam that fell from the roof was laying at an angle from the ceiling to the floor in the middle of the front room. On that beam was perched an enormous vulture. It had its wings outstretched to make itself look more imposing, and it let out a third "hee" and flapped its wings. I let out a chuckle and said, "We'll come back later," and we slid down that porch and left. While vultures are for the most part harmless towards humans, I've heard stories that if they get frightened, they can projectile vomit onto their would-be predators. I really didn't need that. While this may not be the most terrifying story, I hope you enjoyed the imagery because in reality, it was quite scary when it happened. Also, G's face was priceless in real life. Funny enough, this wouldn't be the last time I encountered this bird. A couple of years later, I was walking with another friend of mine, Jay. Jay was interested in seeing the houses in person, since I'd previously told him about them when we were at work. I took him up to see House 4, and while we were examining the side of the house, that goddamn buzzard tore out of a hole in the side of the metal roof, screeching and hitting every obstacle on the way out. It sounded like the whole forest was coming down. Jay and I were both on the ground from ducking in a hurry, and we shared a good laugh afterwards. Nothing beats a good real-life jump scare.